our special guest, Jon Park-Wheeler. It's such a pleasure to have you in the studio, Jon. Thanks for coming.
Well, Andy, it's a terrific pleasure to be here, and thanks so much for having me.
And I guess I want to start off the show by, first of all, congratulating you on, yet again, another recognition for your musical talent, and that's with the Ottawa Valley Country Music Hall of Fame.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. It was a shock, really. It came out of the blue.
Yes. Tell me more about that.
Well, I got a call one day from Pam Clemens, who sits on the board, and told me I'd been nominated, and my first thought was, oh my God, I thought it was posthumous. So I checked myself for a pulse and no, and then we carried on, and I said, is this some ploy to get me to stop playing music? Am I supposed to retire? She said, no. I said, well, fine then. Let's carry on.
Well, just to let the folks know, the Ottawa Valley Country Music Hall of Fame is set to induct 4 new members on September 24th. It was in 1981 when the Ottawa Valley Country Music Hall of Fame inducted the late Mac Beattie as its first inductee, and it's now 36 years later. And the organization is adding 4 new members, and to recognize the lifetime contributions of people who have really made a difference with music in the Ottawa Valley, and along with Jon Park-Wheeler, of course, Eddie Bim, Lyman Gardner, and Roddy McCann, who's going to be on the show next week as well, will be recognized at that event. The Hall of Fame show promises country music fans an evening of the best entertainers that the Ottawa Valley has to offer. And folks, if you're listening today, we have a pair of tickets to give away. So stay tuned, and that's going to be coming up. So stay tuned. You could win a pair of tickets to the Ottawa Valley Country Music Hall of Fame show.
But Andy, how can they win a pair of tickets? Are you going to tell them later? Oh my God, you're teasing them.
Yes. Well, we want them to listen, Jon, because for those people who are not familiar with who you are and some of the things you've done in your life, you've got a tremendously interesting story. And the show's just an hour long, and I know I could talk to you for hours, but I guess I want to start off with just some basic questions so that some of our listeners get to know you. Where were you born?
I was born in Ottawa to actually a woman and a man who were also born in Ottawa.
Yeah.
All of my brothers were born in Ottawa, and in fact, my children were born in Ottawa.
Okay. But you make Eganville your home now.
Absolutely. It's a wonderful place to live. It's one of the best kept secrets, I think, in Canada, and certainly in Renfrew County. It's a gorgeous, interesting place to live, full of fascinating people, and the nature of the community, even though it's a small town, a village, a hamlet, call it what you will, the generosity of the town is absolutely overwhelming. The way people pull together is awesome. For example, when there was a private fundraising initiative to sponsor a Syrian family of 4 a couple of years ago, some of the churches got wind of it, and ultimately the Catholic, Lutheran, United, and Anglican churches all hopped on board, as well as the town, as well as all private parties involved, and it wound up being a family of 9 that was sponsored.
Wow.
And that just floors me. It is not a wealthy area, although it's certainly not quite as impoverished as the show Still Standing would have you believe. It really is kind of vibrant, but it's not a wealthy place. And yet, the sharing, the sense of greater community is astonishing. Everybody supports everybody in everything. You can't go into Foodland without getting at least 3 raffle tickets for a quilt or a chainsaw or something. There are church suppers constantly, it seems. In fact, my wife and I are going to the Melville United turkey supper at the Legion in Eganville tonight, and my goodness, they do an extremely fine job. Seating is limited, folks, and they only have so many turkeys. But it's that kind of a place where there's just not only the sharing, the community generosity, but the recognition of so many varied people there. It's fantastic. There are so many people who have come from elsewhere who choose to live there, which makes it a fascinating pastiche of people.
What do you think goes into, what are the ingredients that goes into making a community vibrant, making a community supportive like that?
I think a lot of it starts with a sense of being comfortable in who you are and where you are and not feeling remotely threatened by anything else. It's even though there is the Catholic side of the river and the Protestant side of the river, everybody has learned that it's okay to choose whatever faith you have and not be threatened by another, which is why there's 5 churches, I think, in Eganville. And nobody shuns anybody else. Nobody ignores anybody else. In fact, earlier this year, along about March, I think it was, there was an interfaith service at Grace Lutheran, which involved the Anglicans, Catholics, United, some imams from Deep River, celebrating the Muslim part of the service, and a Jewish woman reading from the Torah, as well as elders from Pikwakanagan, celebrating the beginning of the ceremony with a traditional smudging ceremony. So it was all-encompassing, all-embracing of whoever you were, wherever you came from. Every aspect of faith was covered in this one particular service, and it just had this remarkable feeling of inclusiveness. And it was followed by cake and coffee in the basement, and it was just an awesome time. And I thought at the time, this is how the world could possibly be if people sit down together and listen to one another and listen to how the Quran and the Bible and the Torah are all such similar books in the essence of what they say. That it's all about love, community, people, family, sharing, generosity, hope, all of those things. It was an absolutely wonderful service.
John, I know that you've been a musician for many years
Yes.
now. I won't say how many.
I will.
Okay, how many?
I started taking piano lessons 60 years ago.
Wow.
Which means that I'm now older than 60.
Yeah.
And I was old enough to have fingers. So I just turned 65. I'm now a senior citizen after being an intermediate citizen for most of my life. Before that, I was a junior citizen and a novice. But I lie about my age. I tell people I'm like 93 just so they can say, wow, you look fantastic. But the reality is I look like a slightly disappointed schnauzer.
Well, if you want to see what Jon Park-Wheeler looks like, folks, we're going to have a picture of John and myself up online momentarily that we just took a snap of in the kitchen a little while ago, just as John arrived at the station this morning. Your career, John, actually, we've got a clip here we want to play for you and see if this brings back some memories.
You know, all of us on the show are so darn sorry, and sincerely sorry, that this is the third and thus our last current show with the Beatles, because these youngsters from Liverpool, England, and their conduct over here, not only as fine professional singers, but as a group of fine youngsters, will leave an imprint with everyone over here who's met them. And that goes for all of us on our show.
And, of course, that was a clip of the Beatles, one of their first performances on the Ed Sullivan Show. It was a time, John, when music really began changing, and a time, I understand, where music was just coming into your life.
It was in a meaningful way. I was put into piano lessons when I was 5, as I said, but I was put into school when I was 5 and taken to Granny's for dinner when I was 5 and did all sorts of things when I was 5 because it was my job. But when the Beatles came on Ed Sullivan, it was like, that is what I am going to do. And that was play guitar. I'd never seen a guitar before. I knew about Broadway music and Anglican hymns, and that was pretty much the sum of my musical experience. So seeing the Beatles for the first time was so joyous and unrestrained and unconfined, and just the sound of the guitar alone was inspiring to me.
And from those early days, can you tell me, what was the environment of music like? Nowadays, of course, you know, a lot of the bars and things are closing where people would gather to play music, at least in my days through the 80s. But what was music like back then, and what did music do for community? About the only venue that I played at for the longest time were little coffee houses that were organized in church basements or in high school or in school cafeterias and what have you. And I didn't start doing those until I was a teenager. And they were quite wonderful. And that was my first exposure to actually playing live. It was... that was the era of folk music and the beginning of sort of the protest movement that really dominated the 60s, the Phil Oakes, Peter, Paul and Mary, Woody Guthrie, then, of course, Arlo after that. But there was just a huge raft of people singing about how the world is flawed, but we can change it and make it better, which was the nature of music then, I might add, as opposed to the nature of music now for young people, which is largely the world is awful, so let's tear it down and burn it up. Right. So, as a guitar player growing up through those protest years, when people really did kind of rally together to create social change, and bring change to the world, positive change to the world. How did that impact who you are as a person, and how did it impact your music?
Well, among the first guitar players to really inspire me was Paul Simon, who was a much better player than a lot of people give him credit for. And he, let me see, he would craft these wonderful acoustic finger-picking pieces that I quite enjoyed playing. Guitar is a very portable instrument, which makes it very easy to make it into a social instrument in a way that piano cannot be unless there happens to be one hanging around. You can lug a guitar pretty much anywhere, and of course, anywhere there are people who are teenagers, there's a lot of angst going on, and people more than willing to sing Bob Dylan songs or what. We could all sing "These Times They Are A-Changing Together."
Mm-hmm. When you see the state of the world now, with the change in music now, do you feel that some of the gains that the folks who lived through the 60s made and 70s made have receded, or does it just appear that way? Does it just appear that we're taking a step backwards?
I think it appears to, because one of the huge changes between the 50s, the 60s, and now is that back when the Beatles were recording, for example, you couldn't just rent a studio and make the costs were astronomical for having a studio, for running a studio, for actually producing a record. It was just mind-boggling. So if you did not have a record deal, you really couldn't make a record. And that meant, among other things, it meant that all the radio stations in the 60s pretty much played the same stuff, because there were only so many Rolling Stones and Dave Clark 5 and Beatles songs to go around. If we fast forward to now, and in recent decades, anybody with a laptop computer and a microphone can record a song. They can record an album. They can record with unlimited tracks of recording. When the Beatles were recording, their first stop, it was to a 2-track player and later a 4-track. And I think Abbey Road was the first 8-track recording facility on the planet, which made it astonishing. Now tracks are virtually unlimited in what you can do for a tiny fraction of the cost. So what this means is there's a lot of, you'd call it noise, that's become part of the musical landscape because there's so much that would not have been recorded because nobody could get a deal to record that music, if this makes sense to you. But there's still a tremendous amount of really, really good music, good, meaningful music happening. People like Ed Sheeran is just an awesome singer, songwriter, player, composer, arranger, who fill a stadium with one guitar and his looping boxes. John Mayer is a fantastic talent. There are young people who are doing this and saying things about the state of things. And further to that point, there is probably more sort of an international flavor to music than ever before. When the Beatles, going back to them, were exploring the world, they introduced sitar to the rest of the planet, which brought Indian culture to the rest of the planet, and the Maharishi Mahesh Yogi. When Simon and Garfunkel recorded in South America, they brought the pan flute to the rest of the world. And I could spend hours just talking about the dissemination of music from Europe to America, from Africa to America, back to Jamaica, back to Europe, back to Africa, back to Jamaica, and you wind up with albums like Paul Simon recording Graceland and Rhythm of the Saints in Africa with Africans, and it is cultures being harmonious together. Even though there are the differences culturally, there is the essential humanity of all of the cultures that blends in the music. Sting does the same thing with his influences from Moroccan music.
Yeah.
So those things are positive to me. And then there's a whole lot of noise, and I'm not even going to mention Kanye West.
Okay. Well, we are not going to mention Kanye West, but we are going to mention a lot of artists that you are familiar with, and ones that Jon Park-Wheeler has worked with. But like Susan Glukark, for example, who comes to mind when you talk about that cross-cultural fusion of music and the introduction of cultures to other cultures through music. But first, we're going to take a commercial break, and we'll be right back with the Ottawa Valley Country Music Hall of Fame nominee set for induction this year on September 24th, Mr. Jon Park-Wheeler. Stay tuned, folks. We'll be back.
Canada-wide clearance continues at Reed Brothers GM. We're overstocked with 2017 GMC Sierras and Chev Silverados. Our 2 lots can't hold them, and we have to sell them today. With 0% financing up to 84 months, we can and will get you into a new 2017. Don't miss the 2017 clear out on now at Reed Brothers GM in Arnprior, online at reedbros.ca.
This is Doc Williams.
Hello, this is Eddie Francis.
Hi, this is Ira Grant.
Hi, I'm Ted Hicks.
And I'm Ivan Hicks.
This is Jennifer Johnston.
G'day, friends. I'm Jimmy Fair.
Hi, Earl Montague here.
And you can hear all these great folks on Vic's Classic Country on Valley Heritage Radio 98.7 FM every Sunday, 4 to 8 p.m.
I'm Lowell Green, and I've been a customer of Centennial Glass for a long, long time, as recently as this past winter. One of the things that always impresses me, not only do you have the product at Centennial Glass, but it's people. I give Centennial Glass a call. I know that good, highly trained professional people are going to be there when they say they will, and they're going to do a top-notch job at very, very fair prices. Centennial Glass Industrial, near the train yards, and Renfrew, centennialglass.com.
Join me, Leslie Galbraith, every Saturday night from 8 till 10 p.m. right after Valley Saturday Night with Mike Kluche for the Saturday Night Super 70s Show. Each week, book a tour through the 70s and sample all the genres that made the 70s the decade of change. The Saturday Night Super 70s Show with me, Leslie Galbraith. It'll be a blast from the past. Can you dig it?
Walk right in, sit right down. Baby, let your hair hang down.
This is Mark from Nerds on Site. By
By now you have heard about ransomware and what is your computer. Traditional antivirus solutions will never be effective enough in order to prevent the annihilation of your data. But endpoint security protection is extremely effective and affordable. Learn more and ask more questions by calling Mark, your computer guy, at 1-877-OnSite.com. OnSite, we don't service computers, we serve people with computers.
And we're back. Joining us today, special guest Jon Park-Wheeler, makes Eganville his home for many years. Jon is one of the nominees, the inductees that's into the Ottawa Valley Country Music Hall of Fame that's set for September 24th here at Centrepoint Theatre. Jon, just before the break, we were talking about some of the folks that the way culture crosses over and just almost like food in a way, because I love
it really
food,
does. And music is that kind of fusion. Fusion.
And so it's the exposure of cultures to cultures, and you were speaking about that in Eganville and what makes those such a wonderful community. And it also happens in music, and it happened in a very substantial way when with the advent of rock and roll in 1958 and the Beatles, when group when you said, that's what I want to do. I play like that, and as a guitar player, you then got exposed to all kinds of different people and kind of social justice ideas that were going on in other cultures. One of those people, among many, was Susan Glukark. So I want you to take a listen to this clip here.
Why would you pick the perfect flower when you could have watched it grow? It's such a careless waste of life when you see Arctic rose.
And you were listening to Susan Glukark, and the song was Arctic Rose. And Jon, I understand you were co-producer and guitar player on that album. Is that correct?
Yeah, I played all the guitars. I did a lot of the arranging. I did some of the writing for Susan, as a matter of fact, on that album, on a couple of cuts. And that album won the Juno for Best Aboriginal Recording that year, which is the only Juno I'm entitled to have for the production credit. And it was terrific working with Susan. She's a wonderful person and an inspiration for a lot of people for not only what she's been through, but what she's arrived at doing with her life, which is to spread an incredibly positive message of hope everywhere that she goes. And Arctic Rose was the first full-length album that she produced, that came out of Susan's extensive library. There had been some smaller stuff before that, some radio shows and a couple of other things, but it was a lot of fun to work on.
And now you've worked with some other folks as well, and Tracy Brown from the Sons of Maxwell.
Yes.
Artists are, generally speaking, and tell me if this is correct or you have a different opinion, but generally speaking, I'd say artists are people who reflect community, reflect what's around them through their songs and through their music often, or reflect their lived experiences often, or simply bring who they are to their music. And as such, I imagine you've met some people who have a wide variety, an eclectic variety of experiences that must have in some ways influenced you. Is that fair to say?
I would say I've been influenced by everybody that I've met in my life, and I've certainly been influenced especially by everybody who has had me work for them in their band or in the studio or what have you. That's been fascinating along the way. I've met some amazing people, some people who seem to be better than life, larger than life, too good to be true sort of people that are exactly those people.
Wow.
24 hours a day, all the time. And if possible, even nicer in person than they would appear to be on stage.
Wow. That's encouraging. That's nice.
Yeah. And I would say, by and large, most of the people I've ever worked with in the music business have been of that ilk. When you're a musician for a living, you tend to be a little vulnerable because at some point you realize that when you sing or when you choose to play guitar or bass or drums or what have you, you are walking in the shadows of giants. You're walking in the shadows of people who were so excellent they inspired you to do those things. And one tends to be very, very aware of one's own shortcomings. And as a result, we tend to be quite sensitive and vulnerable. You can call me, try it. I won't cry, I promise. But it's in keeping that sort of sensitivity in that permits writers to say things that are real. And that's the thing we can all sense as listeners, is when is a song an actual real thing? When is this something that needed to be said? When is this something that flowed out of the writer in such a way that it lands in your soul with such honesty and precision that it's that? You just say, that is what I feel, that is what I sense. And a lot of music has that. And frankly, it surprises me sometimes when music that's that honest and that authentic is successful. I Hope You Dance, for example, by Leanne Womack.
Yeah.
Can you cue that up? No, I'm kidding.
Well, but Devin, maybe Devin will play it on his show next week. Though he does a show Saturday mornings from 7 to 8 every Saturday. So would you play that one next week?
I can do that.
Okay, great. All right. So, but you were saying.
Gosh, what was I saying? About songs that are authentic and people who are authentic. And Dave Carroll from the Sons of Maxwell is an example of a very authentic songwriter. Susan Glukark, as mentioned, writes an awful lot of experiences which are often cathartic in her expression of her own pain. All joy is in her embracing of life in general. I'm working recently with a band out of Renfrew called BBC. Have you, Who, the Brat, and the Commander? Are you familiar with them?
I am not, but probably Jason Marshall is. He does a show Saturday mornings as well, just before this one. And since he's done the show, John, within 6 months, he's played more than 300 CDs from just area people, like, in the Ottawa Valley. So this is a really special spot, but I don't know this group in particular. But can you tell me more?
Just to quickly add in there, I believe we've had Bahu and the Brat on Kitchen Party at some point.
Okay,
so we're definitely familiar with them at the station. Yeah.
Okay, so I personally am not, but then the station is.
Well, and they are now Rick Rogers, the commander from Renfrew, and I, of course, am Enigma. Or am I? I've been joining them. We've been playing mostly as a four-piece lately. And Laurie, I was getting around to saying, has written some truly wonderful songs recently that speak directly from the heart and to the heart. She's got a great song called When the Walls Come Down, which we're going to record fairly soon and release it right here on Valley Heritage Radio.
Great. Well, hey, we would love to have you come in, all of you come in and be a guest on our show here, The People's Voice, and when that comes to fruition. John, I want to take you back now. We're kind of going to go back a little because you're a guitar player, but you're a self-described non-singer. But we have a piece here that we want to play for our listeners, and this is something by you called One Day, I believe. Eh, Devin? Yep.
One day you'll go chasing after your rainbow. One day you'll walk alone.
And this is a song by Jon Park-Wheeler called One Day. And folks, we don't have video streaming from our studio, but
oh Lord,
John was really kind of reacting to that one. But Devin is a passionate researcher here, and he found that clip online. Yeah. So
that song has been recorded twice.
Yeah.
Once by Tujat, which is an Inuit act based out of Pond Inlet. Actually, and the other was Andrew Martin, who recorded it on one of his gospel albums.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, it's beautiful, and I just find that when you play guitar, it transports me to another place. I was telling Devin just before the show that you actually played on a CD that I did in 1997, and I said to Devin, "Guy is so good on guitar that even though I had been playing the songs for years, this was with Al Bragg, who was Carol Baker's steel player back in the 70s. And I went to do some tracks, and I said to Al, I said, you know what? I don't want to play guitar. I had been playing guitar for like 30 years by that point, and I said, I don't want to play guitar 20 years because, Jon just interpreted everything so beautifully, and like it's like when it made me feel, you were talking about being humbled earlier. Well, I felt like I was in kindergarten watching, a master, and I just thought, I don't want to play. I just want to. He did it and interpreted it perfectly. Let's leave it like that. And so when Devin found this clip one day of you playing guitar, once again, even though you're self-critical about that,
you have idea.
it transported me too, and I did hear a lot of love in there for your grandchild.
My daughter, actually.
Your daughter, okay, all right. So you're a family man?
Yeah, I have nice segue, by the way. I have a lovely wife, Heather, to whom I've been married for 43 years now. 43 wonderful years. 2 not so great. No, it's just been 43 wonderful years. And we have a daughter named Jessie, for whom I wrote that song, and a son named Oz.
Okay.
And those people are the center of my life, really. My wife has been unbelievably supportive of everything I've ever wanted to do in music. She's let me go and play with the kids, as it were, for my whole life. And
wow.
As long as I bring home some bacon, of course.
Well, you, I have no doubt, you have probably matched her in terms of being a person, being a spouse and being a father and being a grandfather. In fact,
actually, I'm not a grandfather.
Oh, you're not a grandfather?
No,
okay.
I know I look like the schnauzer businessman.
Okay, so but in terms of your values and being a man of the community as well, one thing I want to clarify with you, because this is in my memory banks from when I met you 20 years ago. I understand that your birth name was Jon Park.
No, close. It was Jon Wheeler.
Jon Wheeler, okay. And when you married, you took your wife's surname.
I did. My wife was born Heather Park, and she informed me before we got married, which happened on a Tuesday, by the way. I think I proposed on a Sunday, that she was going to be adding or keeping her name and adding mine. And I thought, if she is going to do me the respect of adding my name to hers, then the least I can do is add her name to mine, because it doesn't strike me as right that a woman's history should disappear, be eradicated at the point of marriage. So I became Jon Park-Wheeler at that point, which is what I've been for most of my life now, far and away. When we moved, right after we got married, we moved to Vancouver. And this is long before there were interbank transfers and that sort of thing. And neither of us drove. We didn't have driver's licenses. So we thought the best way to get our money out west was to get traveler's checks. And for ID, we got passports, right? Photo ID. It was a great photo ID. And so I went to the passport office with my application, and the guy frowned and looked at it and said, we can't give you a passport in this name. And I said, why not? He said, well, have you had a legal name change? I said, no, I don't need one. And he said, what do you mean? I said, well, it's right here in like item 2 on your short list. Name on passport must be the same as name on birth certificate unless the applicant has married. I said, I got married.
Yeah.
He looked at me and his look said, we meant women.
Yeah.
And my look said, you want to say we meant women.
Yeah.
And then his look said, I see you saying that we know that you want to say that you meant women. And anyway, so there was a bit of a Mexican standoff, and I had my passport 4 days later.
Well, that just shows what an incredibly forward-looking man you are, because I remembered that story. You shared that story with me in 1997, and it stuck in my mind all those years, because even back in 1997, I remember thinking, wow, what an incredibly forward-looking man, to do that. And you're right. And now, of course, here we are in 2017. We have a lot more social awareness, a lot more social consciousness. And what you did was just kind of like showed a great deal of forethought and sensitivity, because that's what many people are doing today.
Well, there's that. And women's rights still have a long way to go in our society and in a global society. Girls and women, by and large, are devalued compared to men. This is still, sadly, a culture where things are run mostly by old white guys.
Yeah.
And if you're not an old white guy, especially an old rich white guy, then you don't matter as much as other people do. And one of the things that I grew up through was the women's lib movement, which was strident, and like all movements of its nature, needs to exist until it doesn't need to exist anymore. And we will continue to have radical feminism, and we'll continue to have pride parades and Black Lives Matter and all of those things for as long as it takes for them to not be needed anymore.
Yeah.
So I became, I suppose, a radical feminist back in the day, and my father was greatly insulted, by the way. He said, "You dishonored the family name."
Wow.
And yeah.
Wow. Well, you actually set a trend, and and many after you have followed your example. Jon, you've always kind of been at a place where there was a need for social change, and we want to play for our listeners a clip now that takes us back to a time in CTV's television history, because this is produced by CJOH, I believe, with Suzanne Pinnell. And this is a clip of Jon Park-Wheeler on a show. It was called Marie Soleil, and the premise of the show was actually to teach French to English-speaking kids, and there were three characters. But first, we'll play the clip, and so our listeners can hear it, and then we'll come right back to Jon and talk with you about that.
I think the answer is that if we go fishing, we can get your shoe back. Now, don't worry. Don't worry. All we have to do is ask Marie Soleil to take us fishing. Oh, Marie Soleil! Marie Soleil!
Oh, qu'il fait beau! Bonjour les amis, tu parles d'une belle journée, je suis de bonne humeur, il fait beau. Oui, Fergus, qu'est-ce que je peux faire pour t'aider?
Well, I'm going to agree with you that it is a lovely day. So lovely, in fact, that I think we should go fishing.
So, Jon, tell us, does that bring back memories for you?
Oh, it brings back tremendous memories. I met Suzanne Pinnell, Order of Canada, by the way, and a judge these days, citizenship judge, in the studio. She was, I worked, on 3 or 4 albums of her kids' music, which was all in French. And it was so much fun to do and such a challenge, because she would write things from the heart, but she would write in time signatures like 5/4 and 7/4 and with accelerandos and what have you. Just really unusual and quirky things, and they were so much fun to do. Then I got a call on a Thursday, and it was Suzanne saying, "Hello?" And I said hi, and she asked, "Have you ever done any puppeting?" I'll not do her voice anymore. Puppeteering? And I said, "Not really." I said, "I have a little red puppet that my daughter will talk to when she won't talk to me." And she said, "Well, have you ever thought about doing puppeteering on television?" I said, "No. I haven't thought about a lot of things," and that was one of them. "Well, do you want to try?" "Well, sure. Well, do you think you could come down and audition for the show that I'm doing at CJOH? "Well, when?" "Well, could you be here in 10 minutes? "Pardon?" "Yeah, could you come down in 10 minutes? Because the thing is, we start shooting Saturday morning at 6:30 or something." So,
wow. And, now that show, Marie Soleil, featured, of course, Suzanne Pinnell. Anne Paradis, I think, was the clown?
She was one of the clowns, yeah. Anne Paradis was the clown for most of of the episodes that we did. Lynn Samuel.
Okay, and now that character spoke sign language. Marie Soleil's character spoke French, and Fergus, the dog, which was your character for all 132 or 33 episodes of that show, was you, as you were the dog, Fergus, speaking English. What is the legacy? That show was watched by thousands of school children in the area. What, in your opinion, was the legacy of that show?
Well, I think it was the first truly bilingual show of its type that was ever produced in Canada. Bilingual in the sense that it wasn't a matter of we're going to say something in French and then translate it into English, or in English and then translate it into Spanish. Closed. Abierto.
Okay.
Sad. You know, it wasn't like that. It was actually conversational,
Yeah.
which was more like how people actually talk.
Yeah, and helped each other understand despite our barriers and despite our differences, right?
Absolutely. Just
Just like what you were speaking about at the start of the show with Eganville and the sense of community that's there. I see
nicely done, Andy.
that. Well, folks, we're going to pause for a commercial break, but when we come back, Jon Park-Wheeler is here, and he's going to perform live for us. And if you want to catch 2 free tickets to the Ottawa Valley Country Music Hall of Fame show that's set for September 24th, give us a call. Here's the question. What album or what song or what artist, you can name either 3, did Jon Park-Wheeler co-produce? We played the clip earlier, okay? So what artist did he co-produce? Her first name, I'll give you a hint, is Susan. You can name the song or the artist that he co-produced on that clip we were speaking about. We'll take the 3rd caller. We'll be right back, and Jon Park-Wheeler will be performing live. Stay tuned, folks. We'll be right back.
Autumn, you stay here with me.
And we are back, and we have a winner. And boy, oh boy, the lines were just lit up out there. So if you didn't get through, folks, and if you're still calling, we have a winner. And the winner is Muriel Birch from Rankin. So congratulations, Muriel. You're in for the show of a lifetime on September 24th, the Ottawa Valley Country Music Hall of Fame, and the inductees, 4 new inductees going into the Hall of Fame. So congratulations, Muriel, and thank you, everyone who is phoning in. If you keep listening to Valley Heritage Radio, there will be a chance for you to win more tickets probably later this week on Andrew Cartwright's show or Krista Perry's show. So keep listening, and tickets are available. If you aren't one of the lucky winners, there are tickets available through Centrepoint Theatre for that upcoming show. And Devin Black, the People's Voice producer, I just want to mention something with you for a moment, my friend.
Okay.
And right now, I'm looking so forward to hearing a live song from Mr. Jon Park-Wheeler. Jon Park-Wheeler is one of Canada's most versatile and experienced session guitarists. He's played on numerous albums from folks that you would have heard on Top 40 radio. And he's, in addition, he's been writing songs and producing records for over 2 decades now. In addition to working as a puppeteer on the long-running television series Marie Soleil, and so many other things in his life that we've been learning today, and an inductee into the Ottawa Valley Country Music Hall of Fame.
Wow.
Yeah.
Gee.
And he's still alive.
Amazingly.
It's not a posthumous
I'm not quite dead yet.
No, but you are here, and you brought your beautiful Gibson acoustic guitar. What are you going to play for us?
I'm going to play the very first piece that I ever recorded that I wrote, that I released as myself. And it's an instrumental because my wife has heard me sing before, and she said, whatever you do when you record, make sure it's all instrumental. I said, what? I said, but I write these great lyrics. She said, no, trust me. If you want to sell any, instrumentals only, just guitar solos. So this is one called Reverie. And what can I tell you about it? For those of you that care, it's an open D tuning, but it's capoed to the 2nd fret, which makes it E, although I actually play the song in the key of A, because if there's a more Canadian key than playing stuff in A, I have no idea what that might be.
Okay. Take it away, John. Beautiful. Jon Park-Wheeler, Reverie, an original. Thank you, John, so much.
Thank you, Andy. Pleasure being here. Thank you, Devin.
I have a question for you before we go. What, in your opinion, makes a successful life?
Being true to who you are and pouring yourself completely into whatever it is you choose to do. And honestly, the money part of it is the least of it. Doing what you love to do and trying to make a difference with what you do in this world will make you successful, even if it doesn't reflect that way in your bank account.
Jon Park-Wheeler, thank you so much.